Hello, I'm Ralph Sevenor. Welcome to the Builders of the Alarm Industry. Today is August 7th, 2003. Special thanks to the Honeywell Security Group and Ron Rothman, president of Ademco, that has graciously provided their time, studio, and support in this project. This is a cooperative effort on behalf of NBFAA, National Burglar and Fire Alarm Association, SIA, Security Industry Association, and CSAA, Central Station Alarm Association, through the AIR Foundation. I'm delighted to introduce an old friend, Fred Leonardo. And Freddie's got a lot of experience in the alarm industry, but I think a lot more experience even past that through the telephone industry. And Freddie actually addressed it from a different standpoint, I believe the radio side first. So we're going to go into that later, but I'm going to introduce my partner in this project, Charlie Darsh. Charlie, if I could ask you to open this up.
Thanks, Ralph. Freddie, you and I have known each other for many, many years, but I guess I didn't really know how you got into the industry. Can you just give us a little bit of background?
Sure. Back in the late 60s, I was into drag racing and muscle cars. And one of the problems we had back then, I grew up in Queens, New York, was they would steal the cars all the time. So basically, I got my start in this business in the car alarm business. We would do full alarm systems in cars in Greenfield to stop them from stealing and cutting the cables. Separate battery supplies, separate sirens. And one of the major problems we had was the car would be on the street because nobody had garages at the time, and they would never hear the alarm going off because they lived in an apartment on the 6th floor of a building. So what I devised was a transmitter, a short-range wireless transmitter that would go in the car, and then a receiver that would go in the apartment.
Did you build your products?
I built everything at that time because you really couldn't buy anything.
And the timetable then was?
That was back in the, I guess, the late 60s. 69, I think, was about the right time. And that's how I got my start in the car alarm business. And then I started playing with, again, doing my house and then a neighbor's house. But at that point, I graduated high school, and I said, well, what am I going to do now? I said, well, I don't want to really go to college. I didn't really want to go to college. So I said, you know what, let me see if I can get a job for the telephone company. Always very good with wiring and things like that. So I went to work for New York Tel, which has changed its name 3 or 4 times already since then. And I spent time with the phone company for about a year, and then we went on a 9-month telephone strike. So I said, now what do I do? Right, for 9 months for being out on strike.
And what year was that?
1970, 71. So at that point, I started to do, again, home alarm systems. And, you know, just by word of mouth. Can you put an alarm in my house? Oh, sure. Can you put an alarm in my business? Sure. And it started to grow and grow and grow.
Now, 71, 72, what did you use? Did you make your own at that time?
Some of them we made our own. Some of them we bought from, I think, Christie Industries, Universal Security. These were some of the old companies that had little panels out at the time. And after the strike was over, I was toying with not going back to work for the phone company. But I said, you know, there's a lot to learn at the phone company. So I went back to work with New York Tel, and I stayed there till 1979. But by 1976, I was doing so many alarms. I had already formed a business. I was doing so many alarms after work that I had to have full-time employees. So meanwhile, I'm working for the telephone company, and I have full-time employees installing alarms for me. So this didn't make any sense. But while I was in the phone company, I learned a lot about communications and dialers, and anytime they had a problem with an alarm circuit, I was the one that got it because they knew I knew both sides of the business. I knew the alarm side, and I knew the telephone side. And back then, if you remember, everything had to have an interface device. So you had an interface device with backup batteries that had to be powered separately, so the alarm circuit couldn't hurt the telephone circuit, which was a bunch of baloney anyway. But then finally in 1979, I made the decision. I had people working and the business was flourishing, and I said, you know what, I got to get out of here. So in 79, I gave them my resignation, and of course then they offered me management. So then I really had a predicament, and I said, you know what, guys, it's been too long, let me out. So I left and formed Electronic Systems, which already had been formed prior to that.
You mean some other company?
Electronic Systems is the company that I own and operate now, which I started in '78. Prior to that, it was under Custom Alarm Systems and Home Electronics.
I see.
All right, so I changed the name. I put the X at the end. If electronics spelled with an X, that was for the future, things to come. And then NYNEX took that from me, actually, when they took the X. But
Did you get any money from it?
no, I didn't get any money from that. But when I left the phone company, as you know, I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to rely on phone lines. So I got into radio transmission.
Whose system were you using way back?
Well, at that point, we looked at Hawkeye, Digisec, and Seaboard Electronics.
Was your focus, I'm sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
Were you using the Seaboard then?
Seaboard back in 79, 80, yes.
Was your focus on the radio because you saw the fallibilities in the telephone network, or was it because of the technology? Yeah.
Well, first of all, it had a lot of benefits. Whenever I was involved at the phone company with a failure of an alarm system, the phone lines were cut. So I said, well, I got to find an alternative method of transmission. Not knowing really at that point, digital was fairly new. Since digital was new and the only thing we were installing prior to that was tape dialers, I decided to go directly into the radio side. We put radios in. I think I had radio receivers and repeaters up 2 years before I had a digital receiver. So we were doing strictly radio, very reliable if you did the proper installation, of course. It has to do with signal strength. That's the whole key. And we grew that business till then we needed to get a digital digital receivers for supervising of opening and closings, and then for multiple signal paths. So that's what we did as far as that goes, and we grew that to become a central station. And again, we opened up in an answering service, and we had people monitoring for us. And then we wound up buying the answering service and opening up our own answering service because they weren't reliable when it came to doing the monitoring. And then after we bought the answering service and it grew to the point that the central station and the answering service was so large, we split them apart.
How many accounts at that point did you have when you split it?
Probably about 500 for the answering service and probably about, I'd say, 6,000 on the...
So it was good sized.
It was a good size.
And most of those were commercial?
I would say 50-50 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
More resident, well, or either that or more residential in the beginning.
Oh,
Do you still have the answering service?
The answering service was sold off in '90.
You must have been psychic.
Yeah, it was a good thing that I did get rid of that with the invention of portability and voicemail and call forwarding.
Mm-hmm.
It really put a lot of the answering services out of business.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you have your central station now, which is...
Central station now, which is UL, listed, Factory Mutual, DOD, and it monitors, she's over 20,000 accounts at this point.
And most of them are your accounts?
Yeah, we do some wholesale for a few dealers, but mostly they're our own accounts.
And again, has your focus been more on retail accounts rather than resi or?
Well, the focus on commercial industrial.
Okay.
Larger accounts. It's not uncommon to have an account that pays me $40,000, $50,000 a year for all their services. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're geared for. We're really geared for the large customer.
More in the commercial arena.
Yeah, commercial industrial.
Right.
Let me know any really great memory in your career that had a positive effect as well as an impact on you.
Well, I mean, if we go back to the tape dialer versus the digital communicator, I think the digital communicator really opened up the market, you know, as far as communication goes, if you think about it. Before that, there was no recurring revenue, to us anyway. Either you were a large alarm company that had direct wires into an answering service, because that's the way most of the alarm companies handled it that way, because you were restricted to lease lines and you had to be in a local telephone area, okay? With the invention of the digital communicator, you were able to monitor over larger distances. Right. Not supervised like the old direct wire was. But again, then we backed that up with the radio at that point. So radio came in and really did the supervision where the digital communicator didn't. all right? But again, that's on the communication side. But if you look at the panel side and go back to when a panel was a piece of wood with 2 relays on it.
We've heard that before.
Yeah. And now, I remember putting in the first time delay on a front door, or first electronic panel, and it was crazy,
Sure.
you know? And now we've got jobs that we monitor 1,000 zones on.
You must have a funny or anecdotal story to tell about the industry in the many years that you've been in it.
Marketing side is strange. We go through cycles, I think, with marketing. Marketing, we went through recently the freebie systems, okay?
Do you think we're past that? We're beyond that?
I'd like to say yes, but I don't think so.
Right, okay.
I think it's going to come back. It created a need, and it got more people monitored, which is good for the industry. False sense of security when it comes down to doing 2 doors in a motion. I think people are really led in the wrong direction.
Did it also give a perceived value or lack of
No,
value?
a lack of perceived
Lack
value,
of
which
value, okay.
hurt the industry and caused the prices of a full-blown system to come down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what we were looking the other day. We're going through our 25th anniversary at this point, and we started looking at all our old records, and we see an alarm system special for $2,999, and we've seen that come down from $2,900 to $2,400 to $19,000
Sure.
to $995 to $599 to nothing, to 0
Right.
down. So that, I think, did hurt the industry. What I see in the future is something that we've already started, video monitoring and a lot of internet monitoring. So that seems to be the...
Internet video monitoring or internet
both.
signal?
Both. We're doing video monitoring over the internet, so an alarm goes off, or any time to view a customer's location. But when an alarm is generated, we can view the status of the customer's
How
building.
long have you been doing that?
Probably about 1.5 years or so. And the same thing with the UL,
Have you
AA
seen that?
monitoring.
Of course, naturally, you've probably seen a reduction in false alarms by using that, or is there any comment that you can make using video monitoring to
It's-
enhance what you have?
Video monitoring, to me, is just like a verification of an alarm. I don't rely on it solely to dispatch the police or the guards or not. If I get an alarm signal from the control, we dispatch the authorities or the guards, depending on what the account
So in essence, it's
requires.
another bit of information, but doesn't preclude or prevent you from doing a dispatch.
Not at this point. That's my feeling is you can't rely on that solely because maybe at that minute or that moment you won't see them in there.
Do you see radio possibly going video? Do you see transmitting that through a radio packet system, or what's your thought on that? Because I know your expertise is in the
Yeah.
radio side.
Yeah, eventually it could happen.
You see that?
But again, and it has to do with space and how much airtime can you take for video.
Right.
And eventually maybe it'll happen.
What do you think the most significant event that you might have seen in the industry? Is there anything you might be able to tell us?
In the past,
Mm-hmm.
again, the digital communicator was, I think, the biggest, because that got a lot of central stations involved in the alarm industry for monitoring and revenue. And then what's happened now, since the development of the digital, the radio, and monitoring services, you're getting now investors to look into our business. Remember, we were all small businesses at one time.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It could be good and it could be
Could be
bad.
bad.
It's great for the guy that wants to sell his
Right,
business,
right.
but it's good. It's good for investors. I don't. Again, we were all small businesses, and the small independent business contractor, small alarm company, is what made this country. All right, your bigger companies, for some reason, don't seem to be able to stay in business, and they have to sell because they don't have the customer service. They get too large and they can't handle it.
Strictly a numbers game.
Yeah, it's a numbers game to them. They don't really care about anything else.
If you were to have a protege and you were you were going to train this person that's coming into the industry. Give me a few points that you would want to instill upon this individual.
Well, the first thing is honesty. You know, I learned a long time ago, if you tell the truth, you don't have to look behind you and you don't have to worry about what you say in the future, okay? But the other big thing is don't be afraid of technology and trying something new. Because when there was no radio out there, and I remember when I put it in, you know, people didn't know what it was, didn't know what it did, but we would have other central stations. We would be backing up other central stations with our radio and relaying them to, you know, the other central stations. So we were the central station, okay, basically. And don't be afraid of new technology. That's the key. You know, you got to look ahead. You got to see what's going to come down the road and try it. It may or may not work out.
It's good to hear you say that, because you were one of the early pioneers of the radio, as we talked about. So you've seen a lot of the negatives, and you've been through a lot of the issues.
Correct.
I'm sure there was some heartaches in that too.
Well,
right?
you know, in the old days, the big thing was how to disguise the antenna if you had to put it outside. Because if you put the antenna outside, it's just as vulnerable as the phone lines.
And how did you disguise it?
We disguised them inside of pipes, so they look like they were vent pipes off the roof. We'd put them inside, upside down, inside windows on the second floor. They were any which way that we could come up with a way. Even now with the cellular antennas, a lot of times we'll put them in a piece of PVC and nobody will know what they are if they have to go outside.
Right.
Let me know any really great memory in your career that had a positive effect as well as an impact on you.
There's a lot of interesting stories, but the one that comes out to mind, back, I guess it was the December of 1982. I was sitting in the central station having my lunch. You know, small little operation, probably 1,000 accounts at the time. And the operator says to me, your friend's alarm at his house, we just got a silent holdup. And I said, okay, well, see if you can get a hold of him. Okay, at that time, we would call back. If a customer wanted you to call back on a silent holdup, we'd call back. So she called back and didn't get an answer. So I said, you know what? It's only 5 blocks away. I'll take a run over there. So I grab my radio and I run out of the central and I get to the house. And when I got to the house, I knew something was wrong. I saw both cars sitting there on the driveway and I said, this doesn't make any sense, you know, they should have answered the phone. So I snuck around the back of the house and I looked in the house inside the window and I saw them both handcuffed on the floor. So after going around, well, actually at that point I radioed back to the office to make sure that the police were on their way. And I was able to ascertain that the burglars, the robbers, were gone at that point. And I got into the house because I had a key, and I released them. And that was a lesson that you can't treat all alarms as false, okay? Because the big thing in the industry is 98% of the alarms are false. But the other thing is, the reason they couldn't answer the phone, besides them being tied up and gagged, was they ripped out all the phones. So if it wasn't for radio, and in this particular case, they ripped out the phones, but the line seizure was wired properly, and since it was wired properly, as soon as the alarm triggered, it disconnected the inside phone lines, and we were able to get a signal out to the central station. So, you know, when you have an alarm, you can't treat it as if it's false.
Right.
You don't know till you physically go there.
You must have a funny or anecdotal story to tell about the industry in the many years that you've been in it.
Going back again to the early 80s, and the reason these stories stick in my mind is I was there for them. And this is a story about a haunted house. And we didn't know it was haunted. But we did this house in Holly Hills, which is in the Melville area, Long Island. And when we went to start the alarm, just things were weird in the house. We had 2 other mechanics working with me on this job, and we talk about this. It still comes up to this day. We did this house, and the last day on the job, we finished it up, and there was one other thing that had to be done. So the next morning, I decided just to go back and finish it myself. When I went back to the house, I was working under the kitchen sink, and I heard somebody walking on the second floor. But nobody's home. I let myself into this house. So it didn't make any sense. One part of the story I left out. When that morning when I was coming into this development, there was a van in front of me, an out-of-state van. I didn't take the license plate, I should have. And to make a long story short, when I came into the house and I worked on the house, this van just drove past and passed me by. So after I heard somebody walking on the second floor of the house, I went upstairs to look. Of course I would, you know. Didn't make sense that anybody was there. So I went upstairs, came back down. There was nobody up there. I'm scratching my head. Go back to work. Next thing I know, I hear the toilet flush upstairs.
And no one's there.
Nobody's there. And I hear the footsteps again. So now the 38 comes off my ankle, and I walk up the stairs. As I get to the top of the stairs, there's a picture on the stair that wasn't there the first time I went up. So now I got the chills. I'm just, you know, got the chills, and I say, I got to get out of here. So I finished what I'm doing in the kitchen. I lock up the house, set the alarm, and I leave. So I'm out about an hour and a half out of the house, and my beeper goes off. And I call the office, and the office says, you know that alarm you just finished went off. So I said, what'd you do with it? They said, we dispatched the police and we dispatched the boyfriend. I said, okay, I'll take a run up there. So I took a run up there. The cops were there, and the boyfriend was there. But the cops were there for the second time at this point, because it took me about an hour to get up there. And what had happened was there was an actual break-in. Now you talk about, you know, just finishing an alarm and the alarm going off, and you're saying, well, maybe it's a false alarm. But again, the burglar broke in the house, and when the cop came and checked the house and the boyfriend, they thought he was gone. He hid in the boiler room downstairs. So as soon as the cop left, the burglar ran out from the basement, out the front door and into the woods, and the boyfriend chased him. Well, the boyfriend didn't catch him, but he jumped into that van and took off. So again, another type of an alarm. Now, when I spoke to the boyfriend at the house, I said to him, I said, weird things happen in this house. And he started to laugh at me. And I said, what are you laughing about? He said, didn't she tell you this house is haunted? And I said, no. And he told me the story about the 3 Indian men that are in that house, and they've seen them. And that was the first of
was
about.
It a burial ground?
Yeah, it was the house is on an ancient Indian burial ground. Now, over the years, a lot of things have happened to us and people, my guys that have worked in that house as.
Are they still a subscriber?
They have moved since then to another location. But one of the things that did have to happen before they moved, she was ready to sell a house. And when she went to sell a house, she started to have neck problems. And she went to a medium, and the medium told her, the reason you have the neck problem is they don't want you to leave. And they had to have an exorcism done to the house.
Is that right?
Yeah, to get them released from that area.
And
it worked.
It did work for
Yeah,
them.
yeah, because the new customer hasn't had any problems. Because I told the new customer that, you know, this house was haunted, but don't worry about it now.
So now you can say electronics protects residential, commercial, and spirits.
And spirits, correct, correct.
That's great. That's great. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Any final thoughts, Fred?
Any final thoughts? I would say that this industry is still a small business industry, and anybody that would like to go out and try to make a living at it can, and they should.
So there's good growth potential.
Good growth potential, and then when you get large enough and you want out, you can always sell to somebody.
Well, appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Charlie.
thanks very
Thank you,
much.
Thank you, Ralph.
Good seeing you, Fred.